Ric Flair is back behind his podcast microphone, this time with the podfather himself, good old son-in-law Conrad Thompson. And this just a couple weeks after a very public breakup and falling out between Ric Flair and his former podcast host, Mark Madden. The show has also been rebranded. It is no longer Ric Flair's Woo Nation Uncensored. The show is now called To Be the Man. And it sounds like they're going to be going with switching up the format between interviews, watch-alongs, and just like Ask Natches and that kind of thing. So sounds like it's going to be a mixed bag, probably just to keep Rick engaged because let's face it, he's a man who seems determined to have a podcast that doesn't really seem all that entertained doing a podcast. He's bored with it, right? He can't be bothered. But Conrad, if anybody can pull a show out of Rick, it's going to be Conrad. And they did drop their first episode this week. And, of course, Ric Flair wasted no time talking shit about his fellow professional wrestling cohorts. This time, the Ultimate Warrior. Check out this clip.
It's been fun for me to think about if you could fantasy book. What if things turned out differently and somehow Jim Hellwig wound up with Jim Crocket Promotions and Steve Borden wound up with the World Wrestling Federation? I think Sting could have somehow been an even bigger star with that WWF merchandising.
Absolutely, and Jim Hellwig would have been on the first match.
Isn't that crazy to think about?
If he got booked, period. Sorry to say that, but you hate to say anything about someone that's not here, but there's no comparison in their ability in the ring.
How many matches did you have with Warrior over the years? Just a handful, right?
Just two in my life.
What was that like?
They were horrible. The first one, I came out of the ring in Winnipeg, Canada, and Pat Patterson was standing there and said, "That's the worst World Championship match I've ever seen in my life." And I said, "Pat, you don't have to tell me. I was in it." The second time with Charles Barkley in the front row in Phoenix, he dropped me on my head, and that's when I got the inner ear problem.
I think we could have did without the throwing Ultimate Warrior under the bus just randomly out of the blue like that. Though he's not wrong. It is, and it's fun to think about. It is. I love these maybes or what ifs in professional wrestling. Wondering what if Sting went to the WWE and if the Ultimate Warrior was in Jim Crocket Promotions. I don't think Rick's too far off. I think all of us could pretty well guess, unless Sting fell victim to locker room politics. And, Flair mentioned that that's a possibility because there was a lot of it in WWE, as always. But, Sting was also a very well-liked guy. Crockett had its share of politics too, whether Rick will say they did or not, and probably not as much as the WWE. But Sting was a well-liked guy. Nobody has anything bad to say about Sting, so I don't think anybody would have tried to set out to ruin Sting. I think had he gone to WWE, he very well could have been an Ultimate Warrior spot. He very well could have been main eventing WrestleMania 6 against the Hulkster. And on the other hand, the Ultimate Warrior and Jim Crockett, I don't know that I buy that he wouldn't be booked. Certainly a guy like that, he had a very unique look for the time. The face paint, there were a few guys doing it, but Warrior, he also had that body that chiseled out of granite. And there were a lot of big guys back then, but Warrior had a very unique build for that era, where a lot of those guys were big and they were burly and they had the barrel chests and all that, and even a six-pack. But very few guys had a bodybuilder shape. Like, they were all like men that smoke cigars and drink mugs of beer at the pub, right? And then get in fights in the back alley. That's what pro wrestlers were. But Warrior was a bodybuilder. So he had that unique look that not a lot of Sting had it too. There were guys, but not a lot. So I think he would have got a chance in Jim Crockett. But Jim Crockett certainly was more of the work rate promotion. It was less showmanship. So Warrior was a much better fit up in the WWE because they didn't need him to be able to work all that great, and they could work around it and hide those flaws. Whereas in Jim Crockett, most likely, if you can't work, you're going to get pushed down the card. I think he would have got a chance. He probably would have got buried, though, and I think he probably would have been a flop, and he would not have been the star that he ended up being. But who knows? We can sit here and we can play the guessing game all we like, but it didn't play out that way. I would argue that the guys ended up where they needed to, where fate had to have them land for them to be successful, and they were. And it was a great run for both of them. No regrets on either side. But always fun to think about, and not a bad first episode for Ric Flair's podcast. I'll poke in here and there. But Rick, there still at times seems to have a little bit of trouble staying engaged, having interest, or just, he's given very short answers and that kind of thing. But we'll see how it goes. He's with Conrad, so we'll see where the road takes us, and I will continue to cover it for you.
Hey, thanks for checking out that clip. Don't forget to check out other clips here on the channel. And while you're there, throw a like, throw a subscribe, and don't forget to check out full episodes each and every Sunday of the Pro Wrestling Podcast.